The Microsoft Identity and Access Administrator SC-300 exam is designed to validate the skills and knowledge of professionals who implement and manage identity and access solutions using Microsoft Azure Active Directory, Azure AD. Passing the SC-300 exam can help you earn the Microsoft Certified Identity and Access Administrator Associate certification, which demonstrates your ability to secure your organization's identity and access resources using Azure AD. 1. You create a new Microsoft 365 E5 tenant. You need to ensure that when users connect to the Microsoft 365 portal from an anonymous IP address, they are prompted to use multi-factor authentication, MFA. What should you configure? A sign-in risk policy. B. A user risk policy. C. An MFA registration policy. 2. You have a Microsoft 365 E5 subscription. You need to create a Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps session policy. What should you do first? A. From the Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps portal, select User Monitoring. B. From the Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps portal, select App Onboarding, Maintenance. C. From the Azure Active Directory Admin Center, create a conditional access policy. D. From the Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps portal, create a continuous report. 3. You have an Azure Active Directory, Azure AD tenant that contains a user named User1. You need to ensure that User1 can create new catalogs and add resources to the catalogs they own. What should you do? A. From the Roles and Administrators blade, modify the Service Support Administrator role. B. From the Identity Governance blade, modify the Entitlement Management settings. C. From the Identity Governance blade, modify the roles and administrators for the general catalog. D. From the Roles and Administrators blade, modify the group's administrator role. 4. Your network contains an on-premises Active Directory domain that syncs to an Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, tenant. Users sign in to computers that run Windows 10 and are joined to the domain. You plan to implement Azure AD Seamless Single Sign-On, Azure AD Seamless SSO. You need to configure the computers for Azure AD Seamless SSO. What should you do? A. Enable enterprise state roaming. B. Configure sign-in options. C. Install the Azure AD Connect authentication agent. D. Modify the intranet zone settings. 5. You have a Microsoft 365 E5 subscription that contains a Microsoft SharePoint online site named Site. Site hosts PDF files. You need to prevent users from printing the files directly from Sitele. Which type of policy should you create in the Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps portal? A. Activity policy. B. File policy. C. Access policy. D. Session policy. 6. You have a Microsoft 365 E5 subscription. Users authorize third-party cloud apps to access their data. You need to configure an alert that will be triggered when an app requires high permissions and is authorized by more than 20 users. Which type of policy should you create in the Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps portal? A. Anomaly detection policy. B. OAuth app policy. C. Access policy. D. Activity policy. 7. You have an Azure Active Directory, Azure AD tenant that contains cloud-based enterprise apps. You need to group related apps into categories in the My Apps portal. What should you create? A. Tags. B. Collections. C. Naming policies. D. Dynamic groups. 8. You have an Azure Active Directory Premium P2 tenant. You create a log analytics workspace. You need to ensure that you can view Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, audit log information by using Azure Monitor. What should you do first? A. Run the set Azure AD Tenant Details CMD-let. B. Create an Azure AD workbook. C. Modify the diagnostic settings for Azure AD. D. Run the Get Azure Add Audit Directory Logs CMD-let. 9. You have an Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, tenant. You open the Risk Detections report. Which risk detection type is classified as a user risk? A. Impossible travel. B. Anonymous IP address. C. Atypical travel. D. Leaked credentials. 10. You have an Azure Active Directory, Azure AD tenant named Contoso.com that contains an Azure AD Enterprise application named App1. A contractor uses the credentials of user1 at Outlook.com. You need to ensure that you can provide the contractor with access to App1. The contractor must be able to authenticate as user1 at Outlook.com. What should you do? A. Run the new Azad user CMD-let. B. Configure the external collaboration settings. C. Add a WS-Fed identity provider. D. Create a guest user account in Contoso.com.